Today we go back to November 15th, 1996, when Screamer 2 was released on PC. Screamer 2 makes an impression almost immediately as a game that has no interest in wasting time on unnecessary extras. You get into the car, hit the track, and right away it becomes clear that this is not going to be calm, steady racing, but fast, sometimes downright nervous driving where the car likes to step out sideways, and every corner has to be treated seriously. That is probably the first thing that stands out the most. There is a lot of arcade-style wildness here, but it is not the kind of light, carefree racer where everything is forgiven. After only a few races, it becomes obvious that you have to learn its character, feel the grip, and understand when you can push hard without hesitation, and when it is smarter to back off for a moment. It is also worth remembering who was behind this title. Screamer 2 was created by the Italian studio Milestone, previously known as Graffiti, the same team that had already made the first Screamer. In this sequel, you can feel that the developers did not simply want to repeat the same formula, but instead tried to push the series in a slightly different direction. The game was published by Virgin Interactive, and the whole thing carries that very distinctive feel of a mid-1990s PC production. Bold, fast, a little rough around the edges, but made with a lot of confidence. The biggest change compared with the first Screamer is visible right away. Instead of more asphalt-focused, sportier racing, everything here leans much more heavily into a rally-inspired style. The cars feel wilder, the tracks are more varied, and the driving itself is less elegant but far more aggressive. These are not races where you glide along a perfectly smooth surface and simply search for the ideal racing line. Here you constantly feel that you are fighting both the car and the road beneath it. One moment the vehicle holds the road quite well, and the next it starts to slide in an unpleasant way, especially if you attack a corner too hard. The cars themselves may not look impressive in terms of sheer number, but each one has enough of its own character to make the differences noticeable once you start driving. What matters most, though, is the way these machines behave on the track. They do not stick to the road, and they certainly do not handle with clinical precision. They respond in a nervous, sometimes almost defiant way. You have to get used to that because the first races can feel rough. For a while, it may even seem like the game goes too far with the sliding, but after some time, that quality starts to work in its favor. Once you begin to understand the rhythm, controlling the car becomes genuinely satisfying. Not because the handling is realistic, but because it has personality. The tracks are one of the game's strongest elements. Their appearance alone keeps them from blending into one another. Each one has its own atmosphere, its own colors, its own background, and its own pace. Some feel colder and harsher, others seem drier, brighter, or more exotic. Because of that, there is a real sense of traveling through different parts of the world instead of just driving through one more variation of the same layout. More importantly, the variety is not only visual. The track design genuinely forces you to approach each course a little differently. On one, what matters most is memorizing the rhythm of the corners. On another, the real challenge is resisting the temptation to push too hard in places that only look safe at first glance. The game modes also work very well because they offer more than just a quick single race. You can simply jump onto a track and start driving right away, but there is also a championship mode that gives the game a stronger sense of progression and makes it more addictive over time. That is where the just one more race feeling works best, because you want to see the next track, improve a disappointing result, or simply prove to yourself that the last loss came from a mistake rather than a lack of skill. On top of that, there is the time attack mode, which can be surprisingly absorbing with this kind of handling. In a regular race, some mistakes can always be hidden in the chaos of battling rivals. But when you are chasing the best possible time, every unnecessary slide, every corner taken too wide, and every small collision immediately stands out. It is also worth appreciating that Screamer 2 does not limit itself to solo racing. This is exactly the kind of game that works very well when you compete against another person. With games like this, there is an immediate urge to compare results and prove who really knows the track better, and who can actually control a car that always feels one step away from sliding out of line. That kind of competition works especially well here because everything is fast, clear, and easy to understand. You do not need much explanation. You just load a race, and after a moment, everything becomes obvious. Visually, Screamer 2 could really grab attention. Today it is pure retro style, of course, but in its own time it was a game that impressed through speed and color. The cars looked good, the environments had plenty of detail, and together it all created a very convincing sense of momentum. These were not graphics trying to recreate reality one-to-one. They were graphics designed to look exciting in motion, and that is exactly where the game works best. At high speed, when the scenery keeps rushing by and the track constantly forces you to react, it is easy to see that these were no longer racing games that looked like something from several years earlier. There was real progress here. The sound also complements the whole experience very well. The engines have the right amount of aggression, the crashes feel heavy enough, and the music suits the game's fast, slightly shameless attitude. These are not tracks that try to build some huge cinematic atmosphere. They simply carry the race forward. They add energy, keep the pace high, and make even another restart feel less tiring because you still want to get back onto the track. Perhaps the most interesting thing about Screamer 2 is that it does not try to be everything at once. It does not pretend to be a simulator, it does not chase realism too hard, and it does not bury its simple formula under unnecessary additions. It takes one idea, dynamic, dramatic racing with a slight rally edge, and tries to squeeze as much as possible out of it. At times it feels rough, and sometimes it can be frustrating, especially when the car does something you did not expect, but that roughness is also what gives it identity. It is not polished to the point of becoming anonymous. There is some rawness in it, some bravado, and a lot of character. For its time, this was a game that was hard to confuse with anything else. It had its own tempo, its own style, and it stood apart very clearly from calmer or more technical racing games. Screamer 2 may not be perfect, because its handling can absolutely test your patience. But once you begin to understand its language, it becomes a very rich, fast, and genuinely engaging racer from a time when PC driving games were only just beginning to build real momentum. And that is exactly why it is still remembered fondly today. Not as a flawless classic, but as a game with personality. One that could deliver exactly what people wanted from a strong racing title in 1996. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed this trip back to Screamer 2. If you liked the video, feel free to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and join me for more journeys through gaming history. And as always, thank you for being here. I will see you in the next episode of Gaming Time Machine.